A man kicked a service dog. It wasn't a weak kick. It was full force. The dog flew nearly 3 feet. Marcus Sullivan was in his wheelchair, paralyzed, unable to move fast enough. The dog's name was Ghost. Ghost was 6 years old. Ghost was the reason Marcus was alive. The kick was filmed. But not by a security camera. It was filmed by 120 bikers from the Iron Wolves MC who were on a weekend ride. They saw everything. They saw the laugh on Cameron Ashford's face. They saw Ghost hitting the ground. They saw Marcus begging for someone to help. And over the next 48 hours, everything would change. Cameron Ashford would learn that there are people who aren't afraid of him, people who can't be bought, people who know exactly how to deliver justice. Marcus Sullivan woke up every day at 5 a.m. It wasn't always like that. 7 years ago, Marcus would wake up because his body was crashing. Nightmares, cold sweats, the sounds of explosions that were no longer there. But Ghost changed everything. Marcus was 47 years old when he met Ghost. Actually, Ghost was only 3 months old. Marcus was in a rehabilitation center in San Antonio, Texas. He had been in a wheelchair for 5 years. The explosion in Afghanistan in 2011 took everything from him. His lungs, his internal organs were bruised. His nerves below the waist simply stopped working. The doctors said he would never walk again. Marcus had already accepted that. What he couldn't accept was waking up every day wanting to be dead. A service dog therapy program came to the center. An instructor named David Chen asked if Marcus wanted to participate. Marcus said no. He said he didn't have the energy. He said he didn't have any hope. David Chen brought Ghost in anyway. Ghost was a white Labrador with little gray spots by his eyes. Ghost had that kind of look that seems to understand everything about you. When Ghost saw Marcus, Ghost got into his wheelchair. Literally, he sat on his lap. Ghost weighed 77 pounds. Ghost was heavy. But Marcus didn't complain. Marcus would cry later that day. It took 3 months. Ghost learned to alert Marcus when a health crisis was coming. Ghost learned to bring him his emergency medication. Ghost learned to get other people's attention if Marcus collapsed. But the most important thing, Ghost gave Marcus a reason to wake up. Marcus left the center with Ghost. He got an apartment in Austin. He got a remote job with an insurance company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a life. It was dignified. It was honest. Every day he woke up, it was because Ghost woke up first, jumped on the bed, licked his face, and waited. Ghost waited for Marcus. 7 years. Ghost was 7 years old. Marcus and Ghost did everything together. They went to the park. They went to the square. Ghost slept at Marcus' feet every night. Ghost was more than a service dog. Ghost was proof that Marcus's life mattered, that the life of a paralyzed veteran still had value, that there was someone who loved him unconditionally. Sunday, July 14th, 2024, 3:30 p.m. The parking lot of the Barton Springs Mall in Austin, Texas. Marcus was in his adapted van. It had a hydraulic ramp. Ghost was lying at his side, vigilant, as always. Marcus was going to meet a friend for coffee. Nothing special, just a normal Sunday. Marcus came down the ramp. Ghost came down with him. Ghost always stayed on Marcus' left side, always. He was trained to be there, to be ready, to help. Cameron Ashford was leaving the parking lot. Cameron Ashford is 26 years old. Cameron Ashford has 3.2 million followers on TikTok. Cameron Ashford makes content they call pranks. But they aren't pranks. They are cruelties filmed to get views. Cameron saw Marcus. Cameron saw Ghost. Cameron was with his friends. His friends were filming. Cameron entered his content creation mode, that state where humanity disappears and only the algorithm matters. Cameron walked straight toward Marcus. "Hey, cripple," Cameron said. His voice had that tone of someone who has never been told no. "That's a nice dog. I bet he's worth more than your whole van, huh?" Marcus didn't answer. Marcus knew responding wouldn't help. Marcus knew the best thing was to get out of there. "I'm going to film something quick," Cameron said to his friends. "This guy is perfect. Paralyzed veteran. Pretty dog. This is going to go viral. Cameron got into position. His friends raised their phones. They were recording. They were documenting. They were about to register what Cameron had planned to do. Cameron Ashford kicked Ghost with all his strength. It was the kind of kick that breaks bones, the kind of kick that causes internal damage. Ghost flew nearly 6 feet. Ghost hit a car. Ghost screamed. It wasn't a bark. It was a scream. It was the sound of an animal in pain. Marcus screamed. "Ghost, no!" Cameron laughed. His friends laughed. Ghost dragged himself back to Marcus, limping. Ghost was shaking. Ghost had blood coming from his mouth. "This is going to look great on TikTok," Cameron said, still laughing. "Just wait for the comments." That's when the engine started to rumble. The Iron Wolves MC had 120 members in Austin. They weren't all criminals. Many were veterans. Many were businessmen. Many were fathers. Robert "Tank" Castellano was the president. Tank was 58 years old. Tank had been a Marine. Tank had been in the Persian Gulf. Tank had lost his brother in Baghdad. The Iron Wolves did a ride every second Sunday. Charity rides. Rides to raise money for veterans. Rides to remember that there were still people who cared. The July 14th ride passed by the Barton Springs Mall. What Tank saw was a young, well-dressed man laughing while a service dog bled on the ground. What Tank saw was a veteran in a wheelchair, helpless, desperate. What Tank saw was exactly the kind of cruelty the world needs someone to stop. Tank raised his hand. The 120 engines stopped rumbling simultaneously. Cameron Ashford saw the bikes. Cameron Ashford saw the black leather vests. Cameron Ashford saw the skulls embroidered on the vests. Cameron Ashford believed Tank only had 120 men. Cameron Ashford didn't understand that Tank had something more powerful than strength. Tank had purpose. Tank got off his bike. Tank walked toward Cameron with the speed of someone who isn't in a hurry because he knows he's going to get where he needs to go. "What happened here?" Tank asked. His voice was calm. His voice was polite. His voice was terrifying. "Nothing, man," Cameron said. "Just a prank from my TikTok. No big deal." Tank looked at Ghost. Ghost was limping. Ghost's tongue was hanging out. Ghost was shaking. Tank turned back to Cameron. "You just committed animal abuse in front of 120 witnesses," Tank said. "You just filmed the animal abuse. And you just laughed while you did it." "Look, if you want money, I can give you," Cameron started. Tank raised one hand. Cameron stopped talking. "Here's what's going to happen," Tank said. "You are going to stay right where you are. You are not going to leave this parking lot, and you are not going to make any calls." Tank walked over to Marcus. "What's your name, brother?" Tank asked. "Marcus Sullivan," Marcus answered. His voice was broken. He was looking at Ghost. "Marcus Sullivan, are you a veteran?" "Yes," Marcus said. "Afghanistan, 2011. Tank waved to his brothers. 2 bikers approached. One was a veterinarian. The other was a retired paramedic. "Are you Dr. Chen?" Tank asked the older biker. "I am," Chen answered. "Can you check this brother's dog? I need to know if he's okay." Dr. Chen knelt beside Ghost. Ghost knew a compassionate heart when he saw one. Ghost licked Dr. Chen's face. "If you believe justice should be served when an animal is abused, if you believe veterans deserve protection, if you believe there are still good people in the world, please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because the next 48 hours of Marcus's story will change everything." Tank had a cousin who worked in tech. Tank had a brother who was a lawyer. Tank had friends who were private investigators. Tank had something Cameron Ashford didn't expect, a network of people who cared. The first thing they did was examine Cameron's video. Cameron had posted it on TikTok within 3 hours. The caption was, "Pranked a paralyzed veteran and his service dog. Look how they reacted. Ha 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 ha." The video had 2.3 million views in 3 hours. Tank sent the video to his lawyer. The lawyer, a man named Richard Walsh, started reading Texas's animal abuse laws. Richard discovered that what Cameron had done was a felony. It was classified as a state jail felony for animal cruelty. It was punishable by up to 2 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. But Richard discovered something else. Richard started researching Cameron Ashford. Cameron Ashford began his TikTok career at 19. Cameron was handsome. Cameron was charismatic. Cameron knew how to get views. But how he got those views was consistently the same. He exploited vulnerable people. Richard found 47 previous victims, an elderly woman whom Cameron pretended to help and then filmed falling, a deaf man whom Cameron ridiculed, a mother with autism whose son Cameron scared for content, a pregnant woman whom Cameron pushed in an elevator for a prank, a child whom Cameron convinced to jump off a platform. 47 victims, 47 different crimes, 47 moments where TikTok did nothing because Cameron had too many followers, because he had too much influence, because he had too much money for lawyers. But Tank had something TikTok didn't have: honor. Cameron Ashford was born in Dallas, Texas. His father was Richard Ashford, owner of a restaurant chain. His mother was Diane Ashford, a lifestyle influencer. Cameron was an only child. Cameron always got everything he wanted. Cameron was not raised to understand the word no. When Cameron was 16, his father put him in a private school. When Cameron was expelled for bullying, his father paid for his readmission. When Cameron used drugs, his father paid for private rehab. When Cameron started his TikTok at 19, his father paid for digital marketing coaching. Cameron Ashford learned a lesson early in life. Money solves everything. Money solves legal problems. Money silences victims. Money hires lawyers. Money buys influence. Money makes you believe you are above consequences. Cameron had $8.7 million in his bank account. Cameron had sponsorships with 47 different brands. Cameron had a $2.3 million house in Austin. Cameron had 2 Mercedes, a Tesla, and a yacht. Cameron had everything except a conscience, except empathy, except humanity. What Cameron didn't have was protection from 120 bikers who knew exactly where he lived. Tank gathered his brothers in a garage. There were 47 victims of Cameron Ashford. Tank decided that 47 victims were 47 too many reasons to let this go. Each victim received a phone call. Each victim was asked to send any evidence of what Cameron had done: photos, videos, text messages, proof that Cameron had caused harm. The evidence started pouring in. An 82-year-old woman broke her hip when she fell. She had hospital bills. A young deaf man had developed anxiety. He had psychologist records. A child had emotional scars. His parents had everything documented. Richard Walsh, the lawyer, started putting together a dossier. He started building a case. The next thing Tank did was investigate Cameron's finances. There was a biker named Code in the Iron Wolves. Code was a former federal agent. Code knew how to follow the money. Code started looking at Cameron's sponsorships. Code found something. Cameron was receiving money from brands, but he wasn't reporting it correctly to the IRS. Cameron was receiving $890,000 in sponsorships that he had not declared as income. That was tax fraud. That was a federal crime. Tank took all the evidence. Tank took the dossier on the 47 victims. Tank took the tax fraud. Tank took the animal abuse video. Tank put it all in a folder. Then Tank made a call. It was 6 a.m. when 120 engines started to rumble. Cameron Ashford lives in a gated subdivision, a gated community, a place where rich people pretend the world outside doesn't exist, a place where people believe money protects you from everything. Cameron woke up to the sound of the engines. Cameron got out of bed. Cameron went to the window. Cameron saw 120 bikers from the Iron Wolves on his street, all parked in military formation, all with their engines running, all waiting. Cameron called the police. Cameron had practiced this before. Cameron knew he could call the police and they would protect someone with his level of wealth, but something was different this time. The police responded. But when they arrived, a deputy named Sarah Chen got out of the car. Sarah Chen was David Chen's sister, the same David who had trained Ghost. Sarah Chen was the same deputy who had investigated Cameron Ashford 2 years ago for another abuse allegation, an allegation that had been dropped because the victim had been paid to stay quiet. Sarah Chen knew exactly who Cameron was. "Cameron Ashford?" Sarah Chen asked. "Yes, these people are intimidating me." "Cameron Ashford, you are under investigation for animal abuse. You are under investigation for 47 incidents of assault and exploitation, and you are under investigation for $890,000 in tax fraud." Cameron turned white. "I'm going to need you to come with me to answer some questions," Sarah Chen said. Tank approached. Tank had 120 brothers behind him. Tank had 47 victims crying out for justice. Tank had a paralyzed man and his injured dog who deserved respect. Tank had the truth. "Deputy Chen," Tank said, "we just want the law to be respected. We just want this man to get what he deserves." Sarah Chen looked at Tank. She looked at the 120 bikers. She looked at the dossier Richard Walsh had delivered to her an hour earlier. She looked at the 47 victims whose stories were documented. "I'm taking this man into custody," Sarah Chen said, "and I can promise you that this time no one is paying to make this go away." While Cameron was at the station, Tank did something that would change everything. Tank posted Cameron's video on Twitter, but not just the video. Tank posted the entire dossier, the names of the 47 victims, their stories, the scars, the trauma, the hospital bills, the psychological records, the broken families. Tank posted the tax fraud investigation. Tank posted the numbers. $890,000 undeclared. Tank posted everything. Tank's tweet was seen 100,000 times in 1 hour. It was seen 5 million times in 12 hours. It was seen 45 million times in 24 hours. The trending topic was Cameron Ashford exposed. Cameron Ashford criminals started to go viral. Then the brand started to move. Nike dropped Cameron. Coca-Cola dropped Cameron. Apple dropped Cameron. TikTok finally removed his account. $5.2 million in sponsorships disappeared, gone in 48 hours. Cameron's sponsors began receiving threats of boycotts if they remained associated with him. Cameron's sponsors realized that staying with Cameron was more expensive than dropping him. Richard Walsh, the lawyer, went to the station with a deal. Cameron Ashford could plead guilty to all 47 counts of assault. Cameron Ashford could plead guilty to tax fraud, or Cameron Ashford could go to trial and lose everything. Cameron Ashford had a choice, but really Cameron Ashford had no choice at all, because the truth had finally caught up with him. Cameron Ashford cried. Cameron Ashford begged his lawyer to make a deal. Cameron Ashford hoped he could pay his way out, like he always had. But this time, there were 47 victims who wouldn't take money. There was a community of veterans that couldn't be bought. There was a deputy who knew exactly who Cameron was and was determined to see him answer for it. Cameron Ashford confessed to all 47 crimes. Cameron Ashford confessed to $890,000 in tax fraud. Cameron Ashford confessed to animal abuse. The sentencing came 47 days later. Cameron Ashford was sentenced to 3 years in state prison for the felony animal abuse charge. Cameron Ashford was sentenced to 5 years of probation upon his release. Cameron Ashford would pay $750,000 in restitution to the 47 victims. Cameron Ashford would have to pay $890,000 to the IRS plus 25% in interest. Cameron Ashford would be banned from TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter for 5 years. Cameron Ashford would be required to perform 500 hours of community service at an animal shelter. The $8.7 million in his bank account would disappear. It would go to the victims, to the lawyers, to the fines, to restitution. His $2.3 million house would be sold. His cars would be auctioned. His yacht would be seized. Cameron Ashford would arrive at prison with nothing. Nothing but what he had done. Nothing but his actions. Marcus Sullivan woke up every day at 5 a.m. But now it was different. Now it was because Ghost still woke up at the same time. But now there was something else. There was a purpose that went beyond simply not dying. Ghost had recovered completely. Ghost had been examined by Dr. Chen. Ghost had received all the care he needed. Ghost had been made a hero. Ghost had saved Marcus twice, once in rehab. A second time when Cameron Ashford kicked him. Marcus now worked for an organization called Warriors and Paws. It was an organization that trained service dogs for veterans. Marcus was a program manager. Marcus earned $58,000 a year. Marcus had health insurance. Marcus had purpose again. Marcus had met a woman. Her name was Emily. Emily was a pediatrician. Emily loved Ghost. Emily loved Marcus. Emily didn't see a paralyzed man. Emily saw a man who had survived impossible things and kept moving forward. Tank visited Marcus every week. Tank brought coffee. Tank brought stories. Tank had become the brother Marcus never had. The Iron Wolves had 120 members. But now, Marcus was their 121st member. Not officially. Officially, Marcus was a brother. Ghost had slept on Marcus's bed every night for 7 years. Ghost continued to sleep on Marcus's bed, but now there was room for 2 more. There was room for Emily. There was room for life. Marcus was planning to propose to Emily on Thanksgiving. He was going to do it at an Iron Wolves meeting. He was going to do it in front of the 120 brothers who had literally saved his life, who had made the whole world finally understand that veterans matter. We tend to judge people by what we see. A man in a wheelchair doesn't look powerful. A white dog doesn't look terrifyingly important. Bikers in black leather look dangerous. But appearance isn't truth. Appearance is a lie. The truth is that the man in the wheelchair had enough strength to endure 13 years of suffering. The truth is that a white dog loved unconditionally every day with no expectation of reward beyond being near someone who mattered. The truth is that bikers in black leather understand justice in a way most people never will. Cameron Ashford had everything. He had money, he had influence, he had followers, he had legal protection. But Cameron Ashford had no honor, and without honor, everything else is just noise. Marcus Sullivan had no money, he had no followers, he had no influence in the way the world understands it. But Marcus Sullivan had something Cameron Ashford would never have. Marcus had people who loved him. He had Ghost. He had 120 brothers who got on their bikes because they knew it was the right thing to do. Because justice isn't something that happens in courtrooms. Justice is something that happens when a community comes together. When people who matter realize that other people matter. When bikers ride 75 miles because a veteran and his dog needed protection. Appearance versus reality. That's all there is. And the truth always wins.